Got it. All right.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, March 29th, and welcome to the Russell City Reparative Justice Steering Committee public meeting. This is our first Steering Committee public meeting, and we thank you for joining us. We're going to start with roll call. And Ayana, if you could please help me if I miss someone.
Actually, if Liz or Michael V. Johnson could support as I'm monitoring the
chat. Thank you. All right.
The participants.
I will assist.
Thank you.
So Gloria Moore.
Present.
Thank you. Ayana Knowles is present. Michael V. Johnson present. I am here. Deborah Harris.
Here.
Marion Johnson.
Here.
Thank you.
That's not me.
Liz Moran.
Here.
Oh, my apologies. Marion Johnson. There was a Mary Ann Johnson who answered. Marion Johnson, good evening. And good evening to the other Ms. Johnson who answered. Tony Wynn.
Here.
Thank you. Carolyn Johnson. Okay, we'll come back to Carolyn. Michael D. Johnson.
Here.
Cindy Torres.
Present.
Thank you. Priscilla Figueroa.
Present.
Thank you. Kathy Rodriguez. We'll come back to Ms. Kathy. And Francesca Thomas.
Present.
Thank you, Francesca. And for the City of Hayward staff that...
Aisha, oops, sorry. I just want to interrupt real quick. We do have Mayor Salinas, but he is driving, but he already announced himself and then is going to relog on.
Thank you. For the City of Hayward staff present in the meeting tonight,
Oh, thank you, Cheers.
the city manager, Ms. Kelly McAdoo.
Hi, everyone. Good to see everyone.
Good evening. Thank you. Assistant City Manager, Regina Youngblood.
Hello. Good evening.
Thank you. Jenny Chacon, Equity and Inclusion Officer.
Always make these things go.
Jenny's having some problems hearing.
Okay.
She may
I figured it out.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just check with Ms. Youngblood. Are there any additional staff members that need to be acknowledged?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Aisha,
Yes,
a quorum has been established.
thank you very much, Michael. So as was mentioned, we are recording this meeting so that those who are not in attendance can see what the progress of the meeting and the content shared is at a later date and time on the City of Hayward website and our Russell City Reparative Justice Steering Committee website location. And we also want to share that those of us who are on the steering committee are descendants and former residents of Russell City. And so please be patient with us and please know that we show up in this space to share our thoughts and opinions and represent those who came before us in the spirit of remembering and representing Russell City and helping to bring forward the truth about what happened. The things that we share in this space may bring up feelings and opinions and memories that may be filled with joy and much pain. And so we ask for your patience tonight as we work through a variety of thoughts and memories and everything in between. And we learned as we go through this process for something that has never, ever been done before. So thank you for being here. We are going to move into the first item on the agenda. Well, not the first item, number 4. We are going to have a panel of a variety of guests, a couple of guests that are joining us from both the city of Hayward and a couple of commissions from both the city of Hayward and from the state. And I will ask the city of Hayward staff, Ms. Youngblood. I don't know if there is a desire for an order of this panel, but I wrote the names in an effort to kind of maybe set the perspective of this from a state perspective, and then kind of look at what is going on at a local level. So first, I thought we would start with Mr. Chris Lodgson, the lead organizer for the coalition. Sorry, I'm trying to read the agenda at the same time. Chris Lodgson, the lead organizer from the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California. Ms. Youngblood.
Yes. I'm sorry, I might have missed the question. Is there a question for me?
Oh, I just wanted to check, is there was there an order to the speakers that you had communicated, or?
No. Certainly up to you.
All right.
And Aisha, Mayor Salinas has rejoined us.
Okay, thank you very
I think
much.
he is connecting now.
All right. So for those of you who are joining us, I may have mentioned this is our first public meeting, and we are, rather than have this meeting as a webinar style Zoom, it's in a more of a, oh, thanks, host. Thanks for spotlighting me.
Got you.
Always can count on my sister to do that. Rather than have this be webinar style meeting, we are having it family style, meeting style. So I did not mention earlier, Zoom can always be challenging, and we will do our best to manage it. And we just ask that you remain muted. We will be monitoring the chat for questions throughout the meeting. So if you have questions, then please place them in the chat. For item number 4 on the agenda, we actually are going to have Chris, I was mistaken, go last. And then we will have, how about we start off with, I'm trying to read the chat and the agenda at the same time. So how about we have Ms. Artavia Berry start first. Artavia Berry. And if there is an interest in having someone else go first, please correct me. We'll start with Artavia Berry, the chair of the Hayward Community Services Commission first, and then we will transition to Mayor Mark Salinas. And then from Mayor Mark Salinas, we will invite the city manager, Ms. Kelly McAdoo, and then we will go to Chris from the State Commission. And so each person will have about 5 minutes or so, and we'll provide an overview of the background of their connection to Russell City and either the apology or their contribution to the work that contributed to us developing as a steering committee, and or the work that's happening at a state level. And so if Ms. Berry is present, good evening, Ms. Berry.
Good evening, Chair Knowles. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Should I just start?
Yes, because you're going to be spotlighted.
Oh, gosh.
Yes.
I don't know if that's good or bad,
Yes.
but
Welcome.
thank you. And hello, family. It is an honor and a blessing to be among you. First want to give love, honor, and respect to all of the survivors who are on this Zoom tonight. We see you and we love you. And also to all of the descendants of those survivors, God bless you. We see you and we love you. My name is Artavia Berry, for those who don't know me or maybe haven't met me. As Chair Knowles mentioned, I'm the chair of the Hayward Community Services Commission, and I have been seated on the commission. I believe this is my 4th year now, and I'm actually wrapping up my 2nd term as chair, and we will have a new chair come next year. In response to Chair Knowles' question around the connection to Russell City and the work, our work as the Community Services Commission, as it relates to Russell City, began a couple years ago when the pandemic onset. Obviously, we were all in shock, and also realizing that certain communities were going to be hit much harder than other communities because they were already in a vulnerable state. And if I remember correctly, we were officially placed into pandemic around February or March of that year. And then subsequently in May, excuse me, in May, George Floyd was brutally murdered at the hands of police out in the Midwest. Our commission had already been knee deep in trying to figure out how best to move additional resources into vulnerable communities as a result of the pandemic. When this happened, just like the rest of the world, we were shocked, devastated, hurting, and grappling for how best to respond. We did write a letter of support of the movement for Black Lives Matter and recommended that our city do the same. But as we began to have conversations around what we saw going on in Minnesota, we began to have really difficult conversations about what was going on right here in Hayward as it related to the Black experience, not just today, but over the years. And so we had a very open conversation about the Russell City and the fact that it had been disenfranchised, ignored, ultimately demolished and burned down without proper recognition, restitution, or even an apology to the people, the human beings who had built a community there for themselves and their families. And so our commission took it upon ourselves to make a list of recommendations. There were 11 recommendations that came out of our commission to the city of Hayward around ways to not only just say, I'm sorry, we did recommend an apology come out, but to also put teeth behind what that could mean for our community moving forward. So if you've seen those recommendations, you'll see things like support for a Juneteenth celebration, which our city had not had at that time. Many others have picked that work up and stewarded it forward. You'll see things like a home ownership fund for Black folks. You'll see things like culturally responsive education supports for our children. And you'll also see a call to not only apologize to the descendants of Russell City, but to figure out in conversation with those survivors and descendants directly what appropriate restitution would look like. Several months after those recommendations went forth from our commission, our liaison came back and said, hey, we need help. Can you help us draft this apology? We think it's a good idea. So a subset of our commission, myself along with 3 other commissioners, we worked over the summer to draft the apology. We had several rounds of editing and feedback, lots of hands helped to draft that apology. And then that fall, which was about a year and, call it a year and 3 months ago, that same subgroup of community services commissioners went before the city council to present on the history of redlining, racial injustice, institutional racism, displacement, the history of that throughout our country and how that showed up in our own city of Hayward, and how the ramifications of what happened back in the 60s continue to reverberate throughout our community today when you look at academic achievement, Black homeownership, and many, many other markers. Our city council at that time commended the work of the commission and unanimously approved that apology. And you all saw, again, about 13 to 15 months ago, an announcement come from the city around the apology and issuing the apology. Subsequent to that, We also worked to see that those recommendations, separate from the apology, made its way into the city's strategic plan moving forward. So if you carefully look at our current strategic plan, you'll see embedded within it work related to all of the recommendations that our commission made a couple years ago. We were asked to prioritize those recommendations, and we all as commissioners placed the most significant prioritization on convening this very steering committee. Find the survivors, find the descendants, convene them, and begin those negotiations. So in other words, of the 11 recommendations, number one in priority was this group. And we are, as a commission, very proud to have helped to bring this conversation up, proud to have supported the apology, very proud that this group even exists today. And Chair Knowles, please know that we continue to offer our support where and as needed in the process, and are anxious to hear from you and from the group how things are going. And we look forward to having you in a Community Services Commission meeting sometime in the near future. Thank you so much. And I think I answered all of your questions. If I missed something, please feel free to let me know.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Barry, and my apologies to you. She did not know what I was going to ask her before the meeting. So very good job answering the questions, and you're at your 5 minutes. So we are going to, I appreciate you answering the questions, and we appreciate the work of the Human Services Commission, and want to acknowledge all of the commission members who are on the call tonight. Welcome, and thank you for your work, and those who will be watching this later. And we want to transition to Mayor Mark Salinas to maybe talk about the next steps and the work of the council, and provide some context about what happens next, or what happened next, and in this process. Welcome, Mayor Salinas.
Yeah. Well, I have to, appreciate the 5 minutes. I just,
We'll let you run a few seconds over, but listen,
I've been up. Yeah, thank you. I've been up since about 4:30 this morning. I was in Sacramento all day today with the Alameda County Transportation Commission, because I'm one of the commissioners on the commission, of course, and we were lobbying Sacramento to bring more money for transportation and roads and bridges and along in the East Bay. And so anyways, it's I've spent all day, if you can imagine, Trustee Knowles, I've been talking all day. But I appreciate this. First of all, I really want to acknowledge it's always good to have Commissioner Barry. I don't know whether to call her Commissioner Barry, Pastor Barry, Reverend Barry, but I know you are a woman of the cloth, so I always appreciate you on the call, and your presence here is always appreciated. So thank you very much. Of course, to the chair, to the two chairs, thank you for your work on this, and of course, thank you for your leadership in this incredibly important endeavor and this work that we're doing. And of course, I think it was absolutely appropriate that Commissioner Barry start out with acknowledging the descendants of Russell City. This process was intended to the expectation was to listen. This expectation was to empathize, and some of the the term we use in the business is to do empathy work, and this is part of that process is to listen and to put ourselves in the shoes of others, those who have had these experiences, and so it's your voices are heard, your experiences are being learned, and and know that they're not only as the mayor, but we have staff that have been listening and have been working through this along with all of you. And but also speaking on behalf of the city is listening. We're and we're all working through this together. We're one of very few cities that is doing this across the country. And so we are, this is trailblazing work. And so, so we should all be proud of ourselves as we move through this process together. But let me just sort of, for some of you who don't know who I am, and this might be the first time that you're encountering me, just briefly, let me give you a little bit about a little history about myself. Like the Knowles sisters, I was born and raised in Hayward, there's an old saying in Hayward that says that you can't get more Hayward than being born at St. Rose. And I always start with that because I'm quite proud of being born at St. Rose. I'm quite proud of being raised in South Hayward, and I was raised in South Hayward, educated in Hayward. I grew up in Hayward, and today my wife and I live in Hayward. We have invested our careers, we've invested our service life to the city of Hayward and to the Hayward area. And and so it's for me to be to serve as the mayor of a city that I was born and raised in, and to serve with such a great collection of people, Ayana and Aisha, and of course I would be remiss if I did not include Miss Knowles, Mama Knowles. We have worked together on many projects over the years, and our work is deep, our work is intense, and it comes at no surprise that the Knowles family is front and center on this work. And also it comes at no surprise that Liz Sanchez and her work is front and center in this process. And so it's always, so it's always good to be working with everyone here. By occupation, I should let you know that I'm an ethnic studies professor. And all my degrees are in ethnic studies, and my personal research, has always been in this space. I have studied the educational experiences of children of color, and coincidentally, a lot of my research, just given my experiences growing up in Hayward, my research has always been in Hayward. And I've always studied the experiences of urban kids, Black kids, brown kids, poor kids. And I, when I hear cases and when I read histories, such as the history that we're trying to restore today, is, this is the space that I've been working in for a very, very, very long time. And it's a space that I'm very comfortable in. So I appreciate the invitation to be here this afternoon. The connection to Russell City. Well, I have a couple of connections to Russell City on a very pragmatic, very personal level. Growing up in Hayward, we all knew Russell City. We all knew where it was. We would ride our bikes out in the, in the west side of Hayward. And, right before the pandemic, when one of my uncles died, and my family is from New Mexico. One of my uncles died, and I took my mom back to New Mexico to go to her brother's funeral. And as we were sitting there at the table at the reception after the funeral, one of my mom's distant cousins was sitting next to me and made a comment and said, "You're the family from Hayward, right?" And I was like, "We're like, yeah, we are." And he said, "Yeah." He goes, "Every time we go to Hayward, but back in the 40s and in the 50s, he goes, we would always go to Russell City, right there on west side of town. And so people way even in the depths of the Southwest in New Mexico and northern Texas, people knew and people know about Russell City. Russell City wasn't just a location that only Hayward folks knew, or even the folks in Russell City knew. And we know through the history of Russell City that people all throughout the country knew about Russell City. People had experiences in Russell City, and those experiences are still talked about today. And so, you know, as a kid growing up in Hayward, not only did we, you know, ride our bikes back, you know, in Russell City, and not only did we, you know, see Russell City become, you know, the area that it is today, but it still captures the imagination of people all throughout the United States, and even in the U.S. Southwest. And, you know, another connection I have, of course, is
Mayor, I
Yes.
apologize for interrupting you. But you have exceeded your 5 minutes.
Yes.
And so I
I'll
am
take-
going to
I'll take-
transition.
Yes. Can I have 60 seconds more?
I'm gonna give you 40 seconds.
40 seconds. Okay. The second connection, of course, is a fast forward to here I am as mayor. And when we passed this apology, the council had several expectations. And the first expectation was, of course, to engage in a very meaningful conversation. The second expectation, and this was an expectation that I had expressed, was that moving forward, whatever we do, whatever the recommendations come to us, I will be looking for stakeholders who all had an involvement in the Russell City neighborhood. You know, the city and or the county aren't the only ones that were in Russell City. We had schools in Russell City. So the school district should be part of this conversation. So I had the expectation that I had amongst my colleagues was that we include a lot more institutions and government agencies in this process. And then, of course, the last expectation I had was that that this work remain focused on a multicultural, multi-ethnic experience, and that whatever we do, it has to cover the Black experience, the Latino experience, and the other experiences and any other experiences that have been affected by Russell City or who have lived in Russell City. Because Russell City, as we all know, was a multi-ethnic, multicultural enclave in the city. And so that's sort of the lens I have, and that's sort of the expectations that the council has had moving forward. And so, Madam Chair, I'll yield my time.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, you cut it close, but I do appreciate you being succinct with your the end of your comments. And we're going to come back to you because there are a couple of questions that have been entered into the chat. So thank you, and thank you for being here. Now we're going to transition to City Manager Kelly McAdoo. Good evening, Ms. McAdoo. So we've heard from Chair Artavia Berry, and we've heard from the mayor. They've laid the foundation for us. And so when this process all started, you know, what happens next? So the city council, the mayor and city council approves the process. You know, what does that mean for the city of Hayward? What does that mean for us as a commission? You know, what is the city's role in kind of administering the next steps, and what would be helpful for us to understand as part of this process?
Great. I really appreciate the invitation to be here with all of you this evening. I've attended a couple meetings with this group as you were in your organizational stages and formation stages. So just grateful to be here this evening. Before I jump into Aisha's question, I would love to share a little bit of history from the city organization perspective. And for those who don't know me, I have been with the city of Hayward for 12 years. I was assistant city manager, and then in August of 2016 had the honor and privilege of being appointed by the city council as the city manager. And for those who don't know, the mayor and council serve as the board of directors of the city organization. The city manager serves as the CEO. And so my responsibility is to make sure our 1,000-person organization provides services to our community. And at the leadership and direction of this council and the council that hired me in 2016, there's been an increasing focus on how do we provide services in a culturally responsive and equitable way. And I've just been so grateful to be a part of it. I will say, I have learned so much in my own personal, growth and learning through this process. And I think our city organization has continued to grow and learn through this process. So I just want to go back a few years. And in 2016, I think a lot of this sort of equity and inclusion work started in earnest. We, as you remember, the fall of 2016 was also quite tumultuous. There was an election that a lot of people were very upset with nationally. And then Mayor Halliday and the council appointed a community task force to talk primarily about a couple of issues, one of those being whether Hayward should become a sanctuary city. And then also it turned into a task force that focused on a number of issues around equity and inclusion, police reforms, and other ways that the city could advance equity throughout the community and also in the city organization. And so that led to the city council accepting what we called the commitment for it's a long phrase, so bear with me, a commitment for an equitable, inclusive, and compassionate community. And it had a number of recommendations. And one of those that was, I think, most important and most instructive for city staff was that we join what's called GARE, the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. And we did that in 2019. And that really sort of kicked off the city organization and our focus on equity and inclusion, both internally as a city, like how do we promote promote BIPOC community members, how do we recruit them, how do we encourage equitable, and then also looking at sort of service provision, how do we make sure we are serving every community member in a manner that it meets their needs. And so that first year, we really focused on the development of our racial equity action plan. And that racial equity action plan was actually presented to council the week before George Floyd's murder. And so it was a really kind of just interesting timing of all of those efforts. And I think if we hadn't have gone through that work, I don't think the city organization would have been prepared to respond, to hear the community after George Floyd's murder, and to look at ways that we could change the way that we police our community. And the way we provide mental health services and a lot of other things that we've done since that time. The other great thing that happened as part of that process was the city council approved the addition of an equity and inclusion officer for the city, very first one. Jenny Chacon joined us this year. And so we are so grateful to have her join the city organization. And I say all of this to say that this has all helped us to come to a place where we can support and understand and hear the descendants of Russell City, the former residents of Russell City, in a way to get to what looks and feels like reparative justice for that community. And so following the adoption of the apology resolution, the council then asked staff to work with the descendants and former residents to come up with a process. And that's what staff is always, it's like, okay, council says, here's what we'd like you to do, go off and help structure something to get us to some recommendations. And so we started this process. I want to thank our assistant city manager, Regina Youngblood, who's really been leading this work with Jenny Chacon and trying to help all of you form the steering committee and get to a place where these conversations can continue to happen. And then ultimately there can be recommendations to council for what reparative justice looks and feels like from the former residents. So I just want to thank all of you for, I know these conversations have been difficult. I know they've been emotional, and I just want to thank all of you for your just patience, participation, and thoughtfulness during this process. I also want to add that the city, in concert with the steering committee and their work to develop recommendations, has also hired 2 researchers from, now I'm blanking, Regina, you'll have to correct me, San Francisco State University. Sorry, I was going to say University of San Francisco, but I knew that was not going to be correct. So San Francisco State University. And they have been working with city staff, with county staff, with the steering committee and descendants to gather information so that we can all understand kind of what actually happened. Where are the documents? What is the history? What transpired during those years as the community was displaced? And so they have been working on that in sort of concert, in parallel with the work of the steering committee. And we will be also sharing those findings with the steering committee and with the community as we go forward. So I think I will stop there. Did I make my 5 minutes?
You made the 5 minutes, and
Okay,
I
great.
didn't want you to spoil the next agenda item. Come on now. The researchers will be giving us an overview
Perfect.
shortly, but not before we hear from a representative from Chris Lodgeson from the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California. Thank you, Ms. McAdoo. We appreciate you joining us this evening. Chris, where are you?
I don't think I see him. I don't think I see them.
Okay.
Do you know, I just checked the chat.
All right.
Unless you're on a telephone.
Well, it may be they were anticipating on a little later start, but we were anticipating on a speaker from the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California. But until they arrive, why don't we go to a couple of the questions that have been shared via the chat. So let me see. So one of the questions posed is and this is just for this question, it would be for the mayor and city manager. I think this was answered already, but what would be the next steps of this process? And I think that, once we hear.
Yeah. So let me just be sort of real concise here. I think the next steps, as we begin to listen to the researchers, I think, you always want to first identify what happened, right? And get an accurate, the most accurate account as to, what actually happened, and what are the documents that we can collect that, best reconstruct the story of the experiences of the families. And, the data that will be used, of course, there'll be, personal narratives. Of course, we have government documents. It'll be, I'm sure there'll be interview data. I know there's been, and I don't know where this will play into it, but I know there's a film, a documentary that was generated and produced. So I think, really gathering as much data and information that we can begin to reconstruct what happened. As a council, I think that once, once the committee here goes through its process, the council, I think, is looking for recommendations. And, recommendations, would be generated through the committee. The recommendations would be generated through the work through this process. And, and what I would say is, list them all out. I've been tracking a little bit the San Francisco process. And one of the things I thought was kind of interesting about the San Francisco process was, they had, I forget how many recommendations they had on their list, but there was a lot. Recommendations from, direct cash payments to, recommendations to, other kinds of policy changes, to program, implementing particular programs in particular areas, economic development, housing, and so forth. And so I think, and the committee sort of presented them to the Board of Supervisors, and now the Board of Supervisors just sort of sits down and looks at what's financially feasible, what can be done, and then, proceed with decisions there. I think the other next step could be, I would certainly love to hear, included in this process, a teach-in, a lecture series. We're very blessed to be in an area where we have, 3 major colleges and universities with very rich and robust ethnic studies departments with scholars who have done an incredible amount of work and contributions in this area. And so bringing in, tapping that resource and listening to the histories and the stories of people in California, in the East Bay, we may not, I don't know how many scholars are out there that, sort of focus in this area, but perhaps that could certainly help us, learn and, learn about this, learn about these experiences is important. And then, of course, lastly, I'll say, I think we should inventory Hayward and the Hayward area and other agencies in the Hayward area, inventory services and programs that are already meeting the needs or already meeting equity goals or equity expectations. What's being done right now? There's a lot of stuff have been done. I mean, and I think the city manager has certainly outlined some things that we have done over the last few years. But I think over the years, there have been inroads and there have been programs developed and implemented in the school district, at Chabot College, and at Cal State East Bay. And I think once we sort of inventory like all of the programs and services that are in this sort of equity space, in the space of restorative justice, then we can, figure out how to organize these programs and services where we can begin to connect children and families so that we can begin to restore some of the past harms that have been done. So those are some initial thoughts that I have, but I also want to be very cautious and sort of just lay down some expectations from the council or even from me, because I always want to be mindful of the expectation of this group, which is whatever we decide at the end of the day ought to come from this group, should be generated from this process, and and not lose sight of the fact that we're listening, and whatever we do, we're looking to work cooperatively and collaboratively with all of you here.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll go to next question. Ayana or Ms. Chacon, would you be able to grab a question from the chat, please?
Yeah, so about my position.
I wanted to try and go in order of the questions, but since you answered that, yes, go ahead and answer. Go ahead and
Sure.
talk about, yes.
So it is the next question
Oh,
from
it is.
Ms.
Okay.
Ms. Rosekind. So about hired equity officer, my name and responsibilities. So I'm Jenny Chacon. And some of the responsibilities for the city of Hayward as equity officer. It's a new position. Essentially, it's a portfolio of things. So part of it was supporting Russell City, this committee, but we will be transitioning off this project as we hire a project manager for this position to do more research and develop the recommendations. And also under my purview is, as city manager McAdoo mentioned, is the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, which most government agencies, municipalities have that program, which is looking at our internal policies and practices and training, as well as externally with how it can be more equitable, meeting the needs of our communities and as well as our workforce. So that's a big project in itself. And my focus for the first year will be more on internal capacity building. And also another thing on my plate, which is also very important, is developing the language access plan and program for the city of Hayward. So the city of Hayward, over almost 60% of our residents speak another language besides English at home. And so I'll be working on developing a citywide assessment on internally and externally about how we are meeting the needs of our limited English proficient communities and developing a plan around that to present to the council. So that's what I have right now on my plate.
Thank you, Ms. Chacon. And I understand that,
Chris has joined us.
okay, thank you, Ayana. And welcome, Chris.
Hey, all.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good
We're glad
evening.
you're here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Sorry I'm late. I just came from
No apology necessary. We're
Yeah.
glad you're grateful you are here. So I was given a bio to read for you, but I've heard you speak before, so I'm gonna let you I'm gonna let you bring it on your own. So you are joining us, you're lead organizer with the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California. And so, talk to us about the work you're doing at a state level.
Yeah.
And how that connects to us as a Russell City community. And again, thank you for joining us. We are grateful you are here.
No, thank you. I'm grateful to be here. And again, I'll say it anyway for the record. Apologies for my lateness here. I was actually just getting back in the door from the State Reparations Task Force hearings here in Sacramento, which have been going on all day. If you don't know, the State Reparations Task Force is holding public hearings across the state. And this month they're in Sacramento for 2 days of hearings, today, Wednesday, January 29th, and then Thursday, tomorrow, March 29th and March 30th. So today, Wednesday, March 29th, tomorrow, Thursday, March 30th. And I, as mentioned, am Chris Lotson, lead organizer with Coalition for a Just and Equitable California. We are, so far as we know, California's first and only organization born just for reparations at the state level. In 2019 and 2020, we were very, very fortunate and blessed to have the opportunity to help write the final version of the law that created the California Reparations Task Force. That law is called AB 3121. For those who are interested, we worked then with then California State Assembly member out of San Diego, Dr. Shirley Weber, now, of course, California Secretary of State, Dr. Shirley Weber. And after that, we worked to help get the law passed and then get the law signed by the governor. After that, we worked to help recommend people to the State Reparations Task Force. And since then, we have been working to do community education and community engagement to get people participating in the California reparations work. We are also one of 7 community organizations selected by the State Reparations Task Force to do community education and community engagement. And again, just got back in the last literally like 20, 25 minutes from the State Reparations Task Force hearings. The State Reparations Task Force, as hopefully some of you know, potentially not all of you, but hopefully some of you know, is really the first of its kind in the country. There's nothing like the California Reparations Task Force in the country yet. And yeah, that's AB 3121, Michael. Thanks for asking. AB 3121.
Chris,
Yes.
my apologies. This is being closed captioned. So if you could slow down just a little bit.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
Yes,
and
you have great
apologies.
energy. You have great
you.
energy. I'm
Thank you.
gonna need you to slow down just a little bit.
Yeah, happy to do that. And I should have said this earlier. I'm from New York City. So I'm going to have a fast talking energy no matter what, but I will happily slow down. And so as I was saying, there's nothing like the California Reparations Task Force. And I would actually, and no problem, Mike, we're happy to help. So usually when I sort of start talking, and I won't be too long with you here, but I usually ask people to stop what they're doing and just take a moment to recognize and realize where we are and where you are right now in history. And I usually tell folks, every single one of us is sitting in a history book right now. Every single one of you is sitting in a history book right now. And that is because California is already the first state to create a reparations task force. Again, there's nothing like it across the country. California is ahead of the federal government by a lot, shall we say, in a lot, as we used to say. And people are going to be reading, writing, talking about what we're doing now and here 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years from now. That's not only because California is the first state to actually create a reparations task force, but California is already the first state, or excuse me, will be the first state to actually do reparations. And that is the work that is ahead of us now as the California Reparations Task Force really ends its work actually in the middle of this year. And the next part of the work for reparations in California starts. I think, generally speaking, it's important for folks like yourselves who are working on reparative justice work locally to be very interested and connected to what the State Reparations Task Force is doing. One, because you have an example and a model of what to do, what works well, what could work better. You have a established, set, already ready for you pool of resources and talent and people and energy, et cetera, that you can draw from for your work locally for reparative justice and for reparations for the Russell City family. There are a couple of things that I want to highlight, I think that are important, then I'll probably, I'll probably end. And I would love to take questions at some point if that's possible. But there's a couple of things that I want to highlight that I think are important for you to know and for you to consider as you're working locally. The first is eligibility. Eligibility for the work that you're doing and for the types of reparative justice that you're creating and the types of reparations that you will be creating. And I'll draw on what we've learned at the State Task Force. I think some of you may be familiar with, many of you are probably familiar with the rules and the laws and the systems and the policies that really restrict us here in California from doing anything that is what we call race-based here in California, meaning we have, as parts of our Constitution and parts of our laws, restrictions on our ability to do any government programs, any government policy making, specifically for and exclusively for one racial group of people. Right? That's a part of our state constitution. That was something that happened or was added to our state constitution back in the middle 90s through something called Proposition 209. And, there is this matters for us for reparations work because a lot of the work that we're working on and we focus on are for Black Americans, right? I mean, it's a specific group of people. And so one of the ways that I want to highlight, I want to share with you how the State Reparations Task Force has worked through this and how I think this will be relevant to your work locally is when the State Reparations Task Force had to figure out how to do reparations and reparative justice work in a way that is legally correct, is constitutionally correct, and can be strong enough to stand up to a legal challenge, which we expect at some point. When the state task force was asked to navigate that and answer that question, the advice and the guidance and the game that the task force got was to be very careful and specific about how you design your group who it is eligible for, how you design your eligible party for any type of reparations or reparative justice work that you work on. And I think in your case, in Russell City, I think, and for the family and for the families of Russell City and Hayward, I think it's important that you pay attention to this. You may have a slightly, I don't want to call it, and I don't know if it's easier time, but you may have a different sort of way to approach this. But the State Reparations Task Force decided to design its eligibility so that it is specifically for those who are direct descendants of the particular harms that you're actually trying to fix and to repair and to do reparations for. And it's specifically for those groups of people, specifically those who have experienced or are the descendants of those who have the direct experience with the direct harm itself. That is, according to the State Reparations Task Force, and in my opinion, and I believe the opinion of the coalition also, that is the way, the best way, the strongest way to do something and then have what you do remain and stay and last and be something that actually is important and lasts a long time. So that's the first thing I want to point out to you, that the eligibility is important and how you design it is important, because we want, like you want, to see the families of Russell City to be actually repaired. I'll pause here. Yeah.
No, see, you caught me. I was slipping as chair. I did not give you your time limit.
No worries, no worries.
And I apologize. So we are running a little bit over.
No
but
worries.
that's okay, because our next speakers are running a bit late. And so we have a couple of questions in the chat. And so this is now the time that we're going to pose the questions to the panelists. And we thank you all so much for joining us. Ayana, would you please read the next question? The questions, I mean, we'll take a few minutes, 5 to 7 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. And
Okay, I will do my best
questions.
to
Thank
track
you.
these in order.
Yes.
For the mayor, what time period is being considered for the city's reparative justice work and what the committees should be considering? Did we answer that one already?
No, you haven't, but
Okay.
but a timeline, I think I certainly don't want to rush this. And we want to be thorough, and just listening to what Chris is talking about and just listening to what he was just saying, I think as we sort of, work through this process, I want to take as much time as necessary it takes to do the work that we need to do. I mean, I know that sort of sounds kind of general, but I guess the short answer is, I don't, right now, I don't want to necessarily put a timeline on this. I mean, if you're asking, I want to do this in the next year. I mean, I don't know, I first have to talk to the council, and I think council needs to really sort of vet, what their timeline expectations are. But I think my initial response right now is, I want to make sure that the work that this group does has as much time as they need, so that the recommendations that they produce is done, thoroughly, and the conclusions that you draw and the recommendations that you have really are representative of the work. But I do have a question for Chris, though. I wanted to ask him, if you don't mind, Chris, if I can jump
Wait,
in.
excuse me.
Okay, I'll
What-
stop. Madam Chair, Madam
Yeah,
Chair.
let's see what the next question is and see if maybe it connects to the question you already have for the people who are attending.
Absolutely.
Mayor Salinas, while I appreciate you having a question, give us a second. I'll check with Ayana.
Or Mayor Salinas, you could put it in the chat and I'll put you in
Yeah,
the
put
queue.
it in the
There you
chat,
go. Put me in
Mayor
the queue.
Salinas.
Put me in the queue.
Thank you.
If the next question is from, looks like TJ, Hayward Concerned Citizens. And apologies, the last question was from Michael V. Johnson. So this question is, if the decision is monetary restitution, what funding source or from whom would the city be getting the funds from, if not from Alameda County?
And that's for anybody, I think, maybe for
I'll remove Chris off the spotlight so he doesn't feel like he's in the hot seat.
for Ms. McAdoo or Ms. Youngblood.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily have a definitive answer to that question. I think that depending on the recommendations that council chose to approve, they'd have to look to staff to determine, especially if those are recommendations that require funding, what an appropriate funding strategy would be. And then if the funds are available, there could be various means of funding restitution that could be coming from the city or other sources, but no definitive answer for that question currently exists.
Okay, thank you. There is another question that I received, and this is for anyone on the panel. How will we address, or how will, wait a minute. It was related to education. So how will the needs of the schools, be addressed? And that was from Edward, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name, Valou. I think Mayor Salinas, you had mentioned as part of this process, there are different organizations over the course of time that, oh gosh, the spotlighting is just so harsh. Thank you, Ayana. That's better. Thank you. And so what do you, how do you see how do you see education changing or participating in this process? Mayor?
Oh, yeah, I was writing my question down so I can get in the queue. But well, you know, I think the greatest resource our area universities have is you know, knowledge. They have you know, they can, you know, bring to us one, they have knowledge. Two, they have the strategies and approaches of research, right? You know, if you know, they could teach us, they could present to us how to best collect the best and the most accurate data, both qualitative and quantitative. You know, those are research strategies that would, you know, that would certainly benefit us. And I think they would also, you know, once we, you know, bring in, you know, I mean, let's not we forget. I mean, I want to include, you know, we have, you know, up at Cal State East Bay, you know, we do have, you know, one of the oldest ethnic studies departments, you know, in the Bay Area, where, you know, they have very capable faculty with, you know, who have, you know, expertise, both epistemological expertise, methodological expertise, you know, in these areas. So, you know, it's tapping them for their expertise and their knowledge, but it's also bringing them in to talk, to do, one of the ideas I've always had in this work is, is establishing a lecture series. One of the things I started a few years ago was the teach-ins, where we bring in, scholars who specialize in these areas, who can come and, both tell us, or share with us the histories of marginalized communities in the state and in the Bay Area and in the East Bay, but also give us model for us ways in which we can collect those stories and collect that data. So I think the research community, the academic community, and the area universities, I think, can provide a strong source. And of course, at K-12, it's bringing in curriculum and and continuing to teach curriculum supporting ethnic studies and really ramping up, shoring up those programs to make sure that the curriculum that is taught in schools, Russell City and the experiences of descendants are front and center in those in that curriculum.
Madam Chair, can I actually add something to or help answer that question too? Just to add something for how, just to help give some context around how the State Reparations Task Force has been engaging and how the education piece fits. There's a bunch of different ways, and this actually connects to the question that came before too. So
Yes,
I think it's going to be.
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the State Reparations Task Force is required by law to create reparations that align with, agree with, connect with the internationally accepted forms of reparations. So by law, the State Reparations Task Force is required to create reparations that agree with the internationally accepted types of reparations. And they come in 5 forms: compensation, restitution, rehabilitation, guarantees of non-repetition, and what we call satisfaction. Compensation, that's the easiest part to understand. That's the money, that's the checks, that's the compensation, that's the direct compensation to the people. Restitution, you'll be particularly interested in this here, I think, right? The return of land, the return of property, et cetera, right? The returning of you to where you could have been or should have been had what happened to you never happened in the first place. Rehabilitation, and this is going to connect to the education piece, are things like free education, free school, free legal service, free medical services. Guarantees of non-repetition are changes to our laws and systems and policies. And satisfaction, and this will touch education also. One form of what we call the satisfaction form of reparations are updates to our existing education system, updates to our existing textbooks, changing our learning system so that what we learn actually reflects what actually happened. So compensation plus restitution plus rehabilitation plus guarantees of non-repetition plus satisfaction equals reparations, according to the California Reparations Task Force by law. So there are a few ways that touches education. Lastly, the State Reparations Task Force engaged the UC system, specifically UCLA, the Ralph Bunche Center at UCLA, to help do community engagement, really help manage the community engagement process for the State Reparations Task Force. So there's a direct connection to the UC system through and to the State Reparations Task Force also. So there are a bunch of different ways that the state, that the work for reparations connects and can connect to education.
Thank you. All right. We'll take a couple more questions as our speakers are not here just yet.
So I will go to another question. I'm going to actually combine some questions that are related to eligibility. And so I'm going to leave you and Mayor Salinas spotlighted for this. What type of documentation will be required to prove that you are a descendant of Russell City resident? My father is on the cover of the Maria Ochoa book. Will that be enough? And then similarly, considering eligibility comments, how is the state addressing communities, including Latino, Indigenous communities, etc.?
Yeah, my initial response to that is, I don't know what the legal definition would be for how descendants are defined and determined. Chris may have more insight on this, but I'm sure there's I'm sure there is a legal definition, and not to discount or dismiss authentic forms of data, like pictures and so forth. I mean, those clearly are important forms of data, but I would assume that there would be a legal definition, and that I don't know right off the top.
Thank you, Mayor Salinas. And then just additionally, I scrolled up. I knew there was one more related to eligibility. Who is eligible and how many generations will benefit? And then Ms. Youngblood, I saw your hand, so I'm going to give Chris a minute if he has any thing that at the state level, and then we'll go to you, Ms. Youngblood, if that's okay, Aisha.
Thank you both, and thank you, Mayor, also for helping to set that up too. I think so. So at the state level, I'll just give you an understanding of where the state level is on how you demonstrate that you may be eligible for reparations at the state level. So the state made a decision about who is eligible for reparations, and that decision reads something like, I'm going to try to say it off the top of my head, but those who will be eligible for reparations in California are defined as those African Americans who are descendants of persons who were enslaved or free and living in the US before the year 1900. Okay, so that's the general definition of eligibility for reparations at the state level. That's all the State Reparations Task Force has said, with one exception. They've also said just today, actually, that there will be, that you will have to also demonstrate residency in California during a particular period of time to be eligible also. So that's the sort of second piece. That's all they've said so far. They have not told us or said to anyone or told us yet what records you may need to demonstrate that. How do you go about demonstrating that? What types of records and documentation will be required, if any? What they've recommended, there's two last things to say about this. What they've recommended so far is that the state create something called the California African American Freedmen Affairs Agency, and sit within that agency something called the Office of Genealogy. And that will be the place, and that would be the place that would most likely define or determine what types of records or demonstration or what type of system that should be in place for demonstrating that you're eligible for reparations in California. Secondly, or lastly, this is interesting for us because right now, the state right now, and really no cities in the state right now, here in California or across the country, collect data specifically on those who are descendants of US slavery. There is no single one data set specifically for those who are descendants of US slavery. Right now, we collect information on our race and our ethnicity with a big category called Black/African American. That includes people who are descendants of US slavery and people who are not descendants of US slavery too. There's no specific data set. And actually last year at the coalition, we wrote a piece of legislation that the governor signed last year in one of his budget bills. It's Section 14 of SB 189 for those who are interested. And that will make California the first state to finally, starting next year with our state employees, start to collect data on those who are descendants of US slavery. So just wanted to add that piece in there too.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We're going to wrap up this section. Thank you so much to all of our speakers. We appreciate you spending this time with us. We did run over in this section because we were allowing for some additional time. We were allowing for some additional time for our next set of speakers to log into the meeting. And there has been a bit of a change in the game plan. And so I was toggling between a couple of updates, but I do want to just formally on behalf of the steering committee say thank you to the Community Services, and I apologize, is it Community Services Commission, Human Services Commission? I am on a few meetings throughout the week in different cities, and so I don't want to mess up the name, but Ms. Artavia Berry and Mayor Mark Salinas. So Chair Berry, thank you. Community Services Commission, and to the chair and to all of the members, both former and current members, to Mayor Salinas, to Ms. Kelly McAdoo, and to Chris from CJEC. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And we were very fortunate to be able to hear about what's happening at the state level in real time. So to hear, to create the foundation of what's happening related to the work that we're doing, we thought it would be important to build a foundation about how the apology was created. Thank you, Ms. Berry, in giving us context about how the apology was created. And then connect it to the approval process of the city council and the mayor. And then the council and the mayor give direction to the city manager, and the city manager is the CEO of the city of Hayward and provides direction to so that the work takes place. And then we are here working with the equity and inclusion officer and the assistant city manager. So we thank you all for connecting those pieces and being able to also hear how the work that we are doing connects with the work taking place at a state level. And so we are grateful for your time. Thank you so much. We did, yes, thank you. And we hope to have you back in the future. The second meeting of every month moving forward, at least through the end of the year, will be a public meeting. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, know that this is the first public meeting we are having. All of the meetings will not be with presentations where you feel like you're being spoken to. It'll be a little bit different, but this is the first one. So we're trying it out and we'll make some changes. So please be patient with us. We did have on our meeting agenda a presentation from the researchers from San Francisco State that Ms. Kelly McAdoo did reference earlier. There was a bit of there was a change in tonight's agenda, and so there will be a brief update from Assistant City Manager Regina Youngblood about the research that has taken place by the researchers, and they will be on the agenda next month. So we have, as has been mentioned, we have two researchers from San Francisco State that have been working very diligently to obtain information about not only from the media, from the newspapers, but from the county of Alameda related to deeds and to payments that were issued to renters, any property transactions. And so Ms. Youngblood, I know that you did not know that you were going to be providing this update tonight, but I know that you have enough information to share with our group, so I will transition to you.
Thank you very much, Chair Knowles. Happy to provide a very high-level update on the work that the researchers have been doing, and apologizing to this body assembled here for them not being here tonight, but hopefully, and I'm certain that they'll be at the next public meeting to be able to answer questions that you might have about the direction of the research. As the city manager, Kelly McAdoo, mentioned, the city contracted with researchers from San Francisco State, Liz Barganer, who is a professor with San Francisco State, and Liz Brown, a professor from San Francisco State, and George Barganer, who is an associate professor with San Francisco State, to identify records related to the redevelopment of Russell City. Their specific scope of work was to try to identify individuals who were displaced due to that redevelopment. And what they have done is researched more than 734 deeds of record and greater than 490 media articles. The deeds are going to help us to identify individuals who were owners of property, both homes and businesses within Russell City. And the media sources are helping to identify other individuals who may not have been property owners, but who did live and reside within Russell City during the time frame of the redevelopment and displacement. They are also looking at the 1950 census records to identify individuals who lived in Russell City at that time. The 1960 census records have not yet been made public, so those are not available to us. They are also researching the records of the Board of Supervisors, who acted as the redevelopment agency for Russell City redevelopment and the displacement, and identifying records in that way to continue to build the picture as clearly as they can of who lived there, who was displaced. They are finding, and they have reported to us in a previous meeting, and you will hear from them in the next public session, some of the challenges that they've faced in finding records that help to articulate how much individuals may have been paid for the properties that they had in Russell City. The deeds don't possess that information, unfortunately, but there's some possibility that that information is available in the Board of Supervisors records that they are reviewing at present. Alameda County was a bit unique in terms of this particular redevelopment. Most entities, when they are redeveloping an area, they take federal funds to help with relocating individuals. Alameda County chose not to accept any federal funding, which would have required that they keep very specific and detailed records of all of the individuals who were displaced and relocated. And so that is what's making the development of this picture, this complete picture, a little bit more challenging. But the researchers are definitely working diligently, as Chair Knowles mentioned, to tell the fullest picture as possible. And they plan to have a preliminary report for us, at least on the deed searches, in mid-April. And they are working very closely, and they intend to work very closely with the steering committee going forward to help to direct the direction of their research going forward.
Thank you, Ms. Youngblood. All right. So I know that is not what was anticipated, but we assure you there will be an update from the researchers next month. So we are going to move to I know that there have been some questions placed in the chat, and I think that brings us to agenda items for a future meeting and items for the good of the order. And I want to say, so some of the questions we haven't been able to get to, and so they will be captured so that we can try and address them for the next meeting. I also wanted to provide a chance for folks to share any additional questions or agenda items that they'd like to see for a future meeting, and or questions that they have for the researchers. I did see a question related to will there be a defined time for former residents and descendants to share, I think, information about Russell City with them? And that's definitely something we can follow up about in the future. And then an additional question about with so many residents who are now in their 80s and 90s, and so many former residents who are in their 80s and 90s, with this in mind, is there a sense of urgency to see concrete results in their lifetime? And I definitely want to, we have some former residents on this, on the call tonight. So I will, if there are some former residents who would like to answer that, I'm not going to answer for you. I see Miss Erlene Thomas and some Mr. Moran and a couple of other former residents, but there are a number of questions that we will make note of for future meetings and Mr. Brooks, good evening. Good evening to everyone.
Aisha, Chris
Yes,
has his hand up.
okay, Chris. Thank you
So
for
I didn't-
raising
I
your
was-
hand.
Yeah, and I was actually, gonna just listen for the rest of the night, but to this particular point here, just to give you some context of how the State Reparations Task Force looked at this particular point about our elders. Just today, the State Reparations Task Force decided that in any compensation that they decide on and any reparations that they decide on, to pay the elders first. To direct the resource to the elders first. They literally decided that just today. So I just want to say that might be a way to go.
See, Chris, you just on time with the update. Thank you. All right.
Aisha, if I may interject. Since this is our first public meeting and we are talking about our elders and former residents,
Yes.
if I may have the residents either virtually raise your hand
Yes, so we
or
can spotlight
physically,
them.
so
Yeah.
I could spotlight you and elevate you. I'm going to do it for those who I know already with my
Hi,
father
Dad.
first. Hey, Dad.
My dad.
I'm gonna add Miss Deborah Harris. Gina, I see
Hello, Miss
you.
Deborah.
Who else is there?
Hi, Miss Jerry and Vina.
So let me just go through. Rafiq, thank you.
And Nehemiah.
Arlene,
Yes, and Miss
Miss
Gloria.
Gloria. There we go. Sorry, I have to do this manually, so it's gonna take me a second. Oh, wait, there's Miss Tony. All right, who else am I missing? Oh, the Johnsons. Hello. Where's Marion? You don't have your camera on, so it's a little awkward. Am I missing anyone? I feel like I am. Or Miss Arlene is there.
Would you like me to read? So there's a couple, while you're spotlighting for those who are raising their hands, I'll read into the record those who needed to leave.
Oh,
So
yes, go ahead.
from the Brooks family, Rudolph just had to leave, unfortunately. So we want to acknowledge Rudolph Brooks. And then 3 elders left for the Librado and Anna Torres family. So that's from Zach Rodriguez. So thank you for sharing that, Zach. So the question was, we're spotlighting former residents of Russell City. And so that's why people were raising their hand. We wanted to spotlight them for this part of the meeting and show all of the former residents who are joining us for this meeting love.
And thank you for indulging me.
Yes, great idea. Thank you. Next time we'll have to do it at the beginning of the meeting. My apologies.
May I say something?
Yes.
This is Edie Edens from the Edens family. And I
Good
didn't know
evening.
how to get on to this. I've been on the meeting, but I didn't know how to sign on.
We are glad you're here, Edie. Thank you for joining us.
And I'm one of the elders.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you, Edie.
okay.
Okay. Are there any elders that we missed? Thank you, Edie. I think we were able to spotlight a majority of people.
Yes, Mary Ann Johnson, an elder in the 80s as 80 Club also. Mary Ann Johnson.
Good evening, Mary Ann. We're glad you're here. Thank you.
Yeah, there's 2 Mary Ann Johnsons, just to clarify. I'm her son in the background, but there's a lot of Johnsons, and I just want to clarify that my mom is Mary Ann with A-N, not the other one. So
Yes.
You gotta love technology. Gotta
Yes,
love technology.
Yes, thank you. And then we have, so thank you, Ms. Mary Ann. We have Ms. Linda that I see your hand raised. Where'd you go? There you are. Hello, Ms. Linda. Ayana, are you able to unmute? Yes, thank you. Hi. Hi.
This is original descendant daughters of Oya Gonzalez.
Good.
She's 96 years old.
Say that last part one more time.
She belonged to the Diaz family. So she's a direct daughter and she'll be 97 years old this year.
97 years young.
Yes.
I love it.
Thank you.
Well, I think I'm gonna recruit you to be the chair of the next meeting.
Oh, okay.
We can co-chair the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Miss
you very
Linda.
much.
Thank you for being here this evening.
Okay. Bye-bye. Yo creo que dijo bye-bye.
Cindy Torres, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge my mom, Mabel Pacheco Torres. She's on the call here, but she can't put her camera on.
Thank you, Cindy, and good evening, Ms. Torres. Thank you for joining us this evening. Are there any additional elders we may have missed? Well, this is wonderful. Oh, Nehemiah's Moran. You are on mute.
Can you unmute yourself, Uncle? I don't think you can.
It's okay. All right. So while he has his earbuds in. So if any of you think about, hi, good evening.
Hello, yeah, they probably got me connected. You can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Loud and clear.
I'm Nehemiah Moran. I'm 80 years old and I live in Russell City. My parents and a lot of my relatives live in Russell City. So I'm one that's still around. And Liz Sanchez there, she's my niece. She's a daughter of my brother. So we have great memories from Russell City. So I don't want to make it long, but I'm just one of the elders that's still around. Thank God for that.
Yes,
Thank
thank God. Thank God for the elders. So while we have the elders on, this is your time. We have a question for you. So what would you like to see from this committee? What would you like to see from come out of a future meeting or out of this process?
Well, I think they're doing a great job from the big start of this committee. And I think what I heard today through all the speakers that spoke, I think they're trying to do the best for us that were displaced from Russell City. And we appreciate that. And I think they will continue to do the best for us from that great city of Russell City. It's gone, but never forgotten.
Yes, thank you. And how about from some of our other elders who are on?
Hi.
Sorry, Miss Mabel. Go ahead and unmute yourself again.
How about Ms. Mabel?
Yes.
What would you like to see from this work?
Well, you're doing a good job so far. That's all I could say.
Thank you. If you think of something, you just let us know, okay?
Okay, I'm not a good speaker. I'm sorry.
That's okay. You don't need to be a good speaker to share ideas.
You're elderly. And I'm an elderly, of course. I'm in the 80s.
80 years young, 80 years young. Well, we're glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
There's
you.
a lot of people I would like to hear. There's big families like the Reynolds. I don't know if you know anything about the Reynolds. Our family was one of 16.
One of 16. Wow.
And the other Reynolds was the same, one of 16. Two big families over there.
We appreciate you being here.
And thank my daughter Cindy. She's helped me out a lot.
Yes, thank you. Okay, I want to make sure we get input from some of our other elders who are also on. Thank you, Ms. Mabel. Mary Ann Johnson. I'm gonna go row by row. If I see somebody with their camera on, and you don't have to share anything, but I just want to make sure if there's anything you'd like to share. Or
With Mary Ann Johnson. There you go.
Ms. Mary
clear.
Ann, not Marion, but I put the emphasis
Yeah.
on Ann, Mary Ann, yes.
Yes, we had a big family in Russell City. It was like 14 of us. The Rosses, the Ross family, everyone knew the Ross family. They called my dad fisherman because he'd been fishing every other weekend, supplied fish for everyone. He taught us all how to hunt and fish in that time. So he said, if you did learn how to hunt and fish, you never go hungry. So we learned how to do both. We both were hunters and fishermen in the Ross family. And we were there, we lived there many, many years. I moved out there in 1950 in Russell City. So I was there until 1963. So I was there the whole time with the Russell School, Hayward High School, picked cherries with all the other ones. Arlene Thomas, she's on there, and Gloria Bratton. They call us the Golden Girls because we're golden. We're in our 80s club. And so we were out there, and our whole life was in Russell City. So it was quite a challenge, but it was also a good city for us. We lived and had this community. We just loved each other. Everybody got along just well. So we have many good memories there. Many good memories there. So half of my children are born in Russell City, another half are born where I moved to. I lived in LA for a while, and then of course I moved and I live in Fremont, California. Been here for like 40 years in Fremont, California, actually. So I have a lot of memory for Russell City, and I know all the people there. I know the Knowles. I went to school with Winnie Knowles. I went to nursing school with Winnie Knowles, actually. So I know her as well. So everyone there, I know most of the people there in Russell City. Was such a great place and a good place. So we do deserve and need our compensations because we deserve it. It was a whole city for all of us. So whatever we get, we truly deserve it. It's a beautiful place, and we all benefit from it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Gloria Moore. You are on mute.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Gloria Bratton Moore. I'm part of the Sanders family. I lived in Russell City for 15 years and I'm 80. And I too would like to see I don't want to see this process dragged out over the next, 5-10 years. I'd like some kind of resolution during my lifetime. I'd like it to be fair and equitable because for myself, I endured so much pain and suffering living in Los Angeles. You know, I lived on Russell Road. I live next door to a church, but down the street from the junkyard, the dairy, the ocean, you know, the polluted bay. We drink we drink our milk from the dairy that was next to the bay, across the street from the junkyard. And I really would like to see some compensation, some restitution for what we endured. I think, as everyone has stated, it was a beautiful community. We loved everyone. We're part of the Golden Girls. You know, we are a community that still sticks together. And, you know, there was a lot of beauty, but there was also a lot of pain and suffering. And we were mistreated by the city of Hayward, by Alameda County, by all the real estate institution, banking institutions. They all need to be called to the task for the way we were mistreated. So I'm really grateful to the city of Hayward for establishing this committee, but we really want to see some kind of results, fair results. I don't want to just be compensated for education and fair housing. We need benefits that do not exist at this time. So we really thank everyone for everything that they're doing to bring some kind of closure to this during those of us who are in our 80s, our golden years. We want restitution. So thank you very much. And I really want to thank the mayor, everyone who's on this call for us, Black and browns, we suffered so much.
Thank you, Miss Gloria. I would like to help lift up the stories from our elders, as this is the first meeting. And if you're going to remember things about Russell City, I want to make sure that those who are joining us tonight are able to hear from the elders on the call or on this Zoom. So if you are here, and there's no obligation to share, but now is the time.
Aisha?
Yes.
Dad has his hand up.
Dad.
Yes. I'm not one of the Golden Girls, but Deborah, we did date the other day, right? And I had a wonderful time. Anyway, I just want to make a comment about how we are the survivors of a coordinated effort at the federal, state, county, city, and local government effort to repress us and promote a successful, healthy future for another race of folks. So I don't think they have enough money to satisfy me, from my own opinion, but they can try. And to all the survivors, stay strong, and we'll get this done.
Thank you. Vina, we see your hand.
Yes, hello everyone.
Hello.
So we have another Golden Girl here who would like to share a few words, and feel privileged because she don't talk a whole lot.
Yes, tell us your name, just so we
My
have
name
it.
is Geraldine Brooks Sword.
Hello.
I actually came to Russell City right after I was born, but my family lived there before I was born. I was born in 1942. I was born in San Francisco, but on my birth certificate says that my address is 25130 Madison Street. And I lived in Russell City all my life. I went to Russell School, Hayward High. It was a beautiful community. I went to church there, and there were 6 of us. Out of the 6 of us, we had 28 grandchildren. And my dad, officially, they kind of non-officially called him the mayor of Russell City. We also had the fire truck in our backyard. I would like some compensation in my lifetime. And living there was a beautiful thing. I hated leaving. Matter of fact, when I had my children, I brought them there until we were burnt out. And I don't really like talking very much, but that's my story.
And I'd like to add too, so Rudolph Brooks is my uncle. That is my mother's oldest brother. There were 6 of them, and he was number 1. And I see that he did want to share before he left that he would like to see his parents recognized for what they did and what they did for Russell City. They were staples there. We hear so many wonderful stories just about Buster Brooks, our grandfather, and Yvetta Brooks, his sidekick, his wife, my grandmother. We hear such wonderful things about what Russell City meant to them and how we were raised in that idea, in that thought that this community is going to take care of us. And so he also said that there were 6 kids. They were all educated, all grown with successful lives, and how they impacted and contributed to the life and community of Russell City. And that was from my uncle, Rudolph Brooks.
Thank you, Lena.
Thank you.
Aisha, would you like me to continue calling hands?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, Rafiq.
I'm just hello and good evening, everybody. I hear Buster Brooks' name mentioned. I am the grandson of Chauncey Depew Pryor, and my grandfather and Mr. Buster Brooks, were working hand in hand to represent the residents of Russell City as they were challenging these redevelopment plans. In addition to years of hard work in trying to have Russell City annexed into Hayward with services provided that went to no avail. I was born on Jersey Street, and we left Russell City in 1964. So on my birth certificate, it says I was born on Jersey Street. My grandfather, Chauncey Depew, lived on Ohio, and another residence on Madison. So wonderful stories from everybody. I really enjoyed sitting in this meeting. It was very informative, and I look forward to follow-up meetings as well. And I appreciate an opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Rafiq. Miss Velda, I hear you, and I know you're on the phone. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry about my analog approach here.
No
I
problem.
was just trying to piggyback on what Vina said. My mother is deceased, but she was a Wynn who was Yvetta Wynn, Buster Brooks' wife. So when I heard some of the stories, it sounded a little bit like Bonnie and Clyde when they were trying to get the fire-resistant materials to the community of Russell City that were kind of borrowed from the Navy Depot.
I don't know how to get a hand up.
Mr. Gilbert, I can hear you. You don't even need to raise your hand. Miss Deborah, I see you. Are you okay if we go to Mr. Gilbert first?
Yes. I was number 2 in the Brooks family, and I've really enjoyed the meeting tonight. I wasn't really sure whether I would be able to attend because my computer sound went out, but fortunately Zoom has its own sound, so.
And you figured it out.
Yeah, but
glad you made it.
Yeah, I lived in Russell City from the early 1940s until I went away to the university in 1951. So had a great life, enjoyed it very much. And I was very happy to hear, about the apology and about the effort for reparations. I haven't been too active. I'm 87 now, so I guess actually I'm 88, huh? But anyway, so I just wanted to be able to say that I lived in Milpitas after I left Russell City, but I will always remember my time in Hayward at Hayward High School, where I graduated and went on to the university. But thank you
so
for
much.
the chance to speak.
Absolutely. Thank you. And in the interest of time, we have two more hands. So Miss Deborah and then Miss Orlean.
I was just listening to Geraldine and some of the other people who were talking about the fire truck. You know, the firehouse was next to where I live. I never saw the fire engine. I never knew where it was. So the Brooks had the fire engine. I just found that out because I didn't know before. But anyway, living in Russell City, I was there all my life. So I came from the hospital and I was there. And the Golden Girls are all my friends. And for the most part, I never knew we were, what do you call it, indigenous or whatever they wanted to say. We were just having fun. We had the best lunches at elementary school. None of this brought in stuff. My sister-in-law, Elgie, and my aunt, Doris, cooked lunch. We had hot lunches every day. And I even try to repeat some of the recipes, but I make a mess of them. But anyway, I have good friends from Russell City. And what I really want to see on all of this is that the older people who live there, the seniors, that they are taken care of. Everybody is not on this phone call. There are some Anthonys who live out of Sacramento, and there are other people who lived in Russell City that are not on the call. And I would like to see them, including myself, because they took property and stuff and everybody had to move before their houses were burned. So it was just, that's what I want to see. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes for, this group to make it happen. Done.
Thank you, Miss Deborah. Last but not least, Miss Orlean. Miss Orlean, you're on mute though.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
I speak quite often, and I love to talk about Russell City because that's where I was raised, and that's where I went to school. That's where all my friends, my family, and all of us were brought from the Bay Area, which was Berkeley or Hayward. I can't remember quite which one it was, one or the other. I remember my dad taking I and my two brothers to Russell City before he ever bought the property, but I was too young to really understand. And I asked my dad, he was a longshoreman for quite some time. I said, why are you bringing us out here to this place that don't look so good? I can just remember that. And he said, because I'm thinking about buying some property out here. I said, property out here? What could you buy out here? And I remember when we actually moved to Russell City and my dad drove us up to the house, which was on Jefferson Street, and it wasn't any windows, no doors, no anything at the property. But my dad was trying to get all his children and grandchildren out of the city. But I'm saying this to say that I have a lot of friends that was, you know, raised in Russell City, and I'm trying my best to gather them all up. I haven't quite it's about 4 of them that I haven't got in contact with, but that's what I try to do, because all of us deserve whatever is coming to us, whatever you want to give us, we deserve it because we lost a lot. I don't have anything to take my grandchildren or great grandchildren back to say, this is the house I was raised. It's no longer there. Not even the tree, not even the school, not even the library. You know, I have none of those memories to give my children, my family. Mostly all my family was at the Russell City picnic, and they still talk about it because I talk about it often, even before they had that picnic. And I just hope that all of my friends that I grew up with find some of the ones that's still living, that's 80 now, and let them get aboard on a board too with this situation that's going on about Russell City. My father, Papa Ross, and Mother Ross used to babysit me. He's the one taught me a lot about fishing, not so much hunting because I was afraid of the guns and stuff like that. But he taught me how to live off of the land, and I appreciate that. It was a lot of people out there. Miss Martinez lived like catty-corner to our house. She taught me how to make tortillas from scratch, tamales from scratch, Spanish rice from scratch. All of those good recipes, I still have in my memories, and I could see Miss Martinez. No, that's not right, Arlene. I said, do it this way. And that's the way I had to do it. And I appreciate all of those families that I was raised around. And I just thank you for all of the help that you've given us to trying to make it right.
Thank you, Miss Erlene. Aisha, we are 2 minutes after 8 o'clock. I pass you the mic.
Thank you, Ayana. Thank you, Miss Arlene, and to all of our elders that help us close it out. I actually think, I mean, I know many wanted to hear from the researchers, but I actually think for the first public meeting, it was wonderful to hear from our elders first to set the tone of the work that we are doing in this space moving forward. Thank you for being here and spending your time with us and sharing your stories. As it's said at the Russell City picnic, Russell City, the city may be gone, but the memories live on. So I want to say tonight, I'd like to adjourn this first public meeting in honor of those residents and descendants who are no longer with us, but are in our hearts and minds, and that who we are doing this work for. We are here, we will be here doing this work for as long as it takes. So thank you for joining us. Our next public meeting will be on Wednesday, April 26th at 6 p.m. via Zoom. And if you have agenda requests or questions, you may send them to Assistant City, you can send them to myself or Assistant City Manager Regina Youngblood. I believe if you found out about this meeting, you know somebody who's on the committee, and you'll find a way to get in touch with us. So thank you again for joining us. Have a wonderful evening. Be well. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.